Support comes from Thomas Nelson Community College, now becoming Virginia Peninsula Community College, the first choice to start a bachelor's degree since tuition is one-third the cost of four-year schools. More at tncc.edu.
Support comes from Hampton Roads Community Foundation, carrying out your charitable wishes forever. Whether it's helping shelter animals, feeding the homeless, enhancing the arts, or supporting students. Learn more at leaveabequest.org.
Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. So here are some of the headlines over the past week. Gunman kills 10 at Buffalo supermarket in racist attack, the New York Times. Suspect is charged in deadly California church shooting, NPR News. A bloody 18 hours, 6 shootings across Hampton Roads leaves 3 dead and 3 injured, with only 1 arrest announced so far, the Virginian pilot. The common denominator, guns. We look to law enforcement for answers, but is that the only solution? Up next on Another View, a candid conversation with retired police chief Larry Boone, right after this news from NPR and WHRO News.
Discussing today's topics from an African-American perspective, this is Another View.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Before we get into our conversation with retired Chief Larry Boone, let me tell you about Susan Taylor. The media icon is coming to be the keynote speaker at Grove Church Women's Conference. That is this Saturday, May 21st from 10 until 2 p.m. at Grove Church, which is located in Portsmouth. And it is being presented by the We Are Our Sisters Keeper Women's Ministry in the church. It is $25 for a ticket, and it includes a continental breakfast and a book signing by Taylor. If you want to know more information, you can email WAOSK at grovechurchva.com. That's WAOSK at grovechurchva.com. Sounds like a great conference that will be coming to our area. So for more than 30 years, Larry Boone served the citizens of Norfolk, there we go, in a variety of positions with the Norfolk Police Department, with the last 6 years serving as chief. His sudden retirement came as a shock to many, but does that mean that he's done with law enforcement? We are happy to have retired Chief Larry Boone in his first long-form radio interview since he retired. Hey there. I know you talk to other people on TV, but we got you for an hour.
It kind of just hit me when you said an hour. Oh, my goodness.
Absolutely. How are you?
Wonderful.
That is fantastic.
Fantastic.
Okay, so look, let's just kill the elephant in the room right now before we get started. Right. Is there anything that you want to say about your retirement? And then we're going to talk about other issues.
All right. Let me measure my words like I typically do. I'm sure most folks have seen my television interviews where I stand by. Nobody muscles me into doing something I don't want to do. Now, I want to underscore this. On the advice of my lawyer, I am simply to say, I retired. Okay.
Then that's that. We're done with that. You hear that, audience? He is retired. Absolutely. You know, it's so, first of all, last night yesterday, there was an arrest in the Granby Street shooting. And MacArthur Mall, I think, has also had an arrest where that shooting happened. Are you proud of the work that the officers have done to bring those two?
Absolutely. And in both of those unfortunate incidents, I want to extend my heartfelt condolences to the families impacted by those. But the officers, particularly the investigators, I was in just recently, as of yesterday, in contact with them and thanking them for their service, their diligence. They promised me that they would solve those crimes, and I knew that they would. Here in Norfolk, the history has always been, once we identify you, it's just a matter of time. Most of our suspects, they don't
run
go
into
anywhere.
them before in other places.
And if you shoot someone, you think you would leave the state,
you think.
but they stay right here in the city, and it's just a matter of time, which is why I was fairly confident once we identified them, we would arrest them.
Mm-hmm. So this whole thing of gun violence that is happening now that everyone seems to be paying more attention to these days, that's nothing new. I remember you being on our show in the past where you had been tracking guns and where they're purchased and where they wind up and so forth. Why does it seem like right now this is such a crisis? Because if I'm not mistaken, you believe this crisis has been building for quite a while.
Yeah, this crisis, I'm just going to speak for Norfolk and in my experience with urban cities, has been for decades, okay? Mm-hmm. But right now what's happening is shootings are occurring where we don't expect them to occur. All right, supermarkets, movies, in the mall, and that's giving us a real indication of, well, okay, these shootings used to happen over in those neighborhoods. So we can not pay as much of attention to it as we should. But now that shootings are happening elsewhere, and we're going into those quiet spaces, people are paying attention, and that's the reality of it. Until we address the illegal flow of guns, and I sound like a broken record, but I'm going to continue to say this, until we decide to address the illegal flow of guns, we're going to continue to have these conversations because these random shootings are only going to increase.
Are they as random as as the media portrays them, or as others portray them?
Well, I will say this. Generally, when there's a homicide or shooting, folks that decide to pull that trigger, they have a reason, for folks they're trying to hit. Now, what's going on, you have folks that are in the backdrop of these shootings that were not the intended target. And you have these weapons out here that are capable of discharging multiple bullets in seconds. And these young men and now young women, they don't care. That shooting in the mall, I looked at the video, and that happened so quickly, and it happened over a guy. There was a disagreement about money. The guy spun around as the guy was walking away and just started firing at this guy. Didn't care who was in the mall, didn't care that the police was inside the mall, or didn't care that the police was outside the mall. So
caught up right in that moment, and that's just how they're going to deal with it.
Yeah, that conflict resolution is non-existent.
So when the shooting and homicide at Chicho's happened on Granby Street, one of the responses was to put cameras out, portable cameras in parking spaces along Granby Street, and to put more patrol officers and so forth. There's a community right outside of downtown, St. Paul's, which has predominantly public housing in that community. And people in that neighborhood were, as the kids say, in their feelings about the fact that there seemed to be a different response to that than perhaps the response that happened when the 3 women and 5 women were shot, 3 were killed in the Young Terrace neighborhood. Are they right? Do they have the right to feel to be in their feelings about that?
Well, if I say anything political, I'll come off as disingenuous, and I don't want to do that. Every city has a location that they want to protect. It's their treasured item, so to speak. Everybody knows that's been in Norfolk or any period amount of time knows that Granby Street is the mecca of the city where folks come, work, play, and enjoy themselves. Mm-hmm. The city has a vested interest in trying to protect that investment. Not saying that other communities aren't their investment, but look, folks are smart. All right. I don't care how I try to package this. They know what's going on. I'm gonna leave it at that.
So okay, all right. That's that's very fair. That is very fair. But when you look at the young people who are being affected, I mean, lots of people are being shot and killed. But when you look at the ages, when you're seeing people in their 20s and in their early 30s and so forth. If I recall correctly, your background, you grew up in New Jersey, started going down perhaps the wrong path, and you had someone in your family or relative or someone say to you, "You're going down south. We're going to send you in a different direction." What is it about people such as yourself and others who grow up in tougher neighborhoods who are able to pull themselves out versus those who find themselves caught up on the crime side? Is there a difference? Is there some magic sauce there that makes the difference?
I have 4 other siblings. We all grew up in the same house. Mm-hmm. I'm the only one to ever graduate from college. I'm the only one to ever attend college. But I'll say this, I am also the only one that had a particular set of skills that afforded me an opportunity, one, to make people interested in me, and 2, provided me an opportunity to go elsewhere. And I'm talking about I was a pretty good athlete, okay? And what I tell young folks nowadays, if there's something that you do and you do well, highlight that. So folks such as myself, you, that when they see that particular set of skill sets in you, they want to help you. Now, I am not going to pretend what these young folks are going through today or like what I went through. The times are way different now. I was fortunate enough to go live with my grandparents. You guys heard me say many times, the me I see is the me I'll be. Okay, changed my environment, changed the folks that I was in contact with, and I was provided opportunity. Here in Norfolk, there's many groups that are trying to do their very darndest, but it's just so many young folks that need help. Yeah. I was mentoring 3 young men as chief, and I'm telling you, they worked the dickens out me. I'll get calls at night. So-and-so's in trouble. Can you come get him? Go pick him up. And I'm giving him the pep talk. And it takes about 30, 40 minutes for me to get through. And once I get through to him, he wants me to buy him something. And he promises to behave. And we did that over and over and over. And unfortunately, he's no longer in the area. They had to send him away. But maybe that's the fix, right?
But we can't send all of them away. Right. And how do you get through to a 16, 17, 18-year-old who truly doesn't believe he's going to live past 21 anyway? So what the hell?
I think one of the things you do is solicit the support of folks that have reformed their lives, okay? I'm talking about folks that might have gone to prison and have reformed their lives. They generally have credibility, and they're able to speak to folks such as you're describing.
And that credible messenger model, sure. It's interesting, except that recently I read in my own hometown, Baltimore, 2 of the credible messengers killed in the community that they're working because the bad guys, I don't know whether they didn't believe them or whether they just weren't able to stop the beef or whatever, but they both were murdered in that community. So it's kind of like you can't throw up your hands and say, okay, I give up. But where is the disconnect? What are we missing in terms of trying to help these young folks?
We got to not just look at the young folk, okay? You got to look at his or her community. where they lay their head at night, who's in their space, because hurt people, okay? I'll give you an example. One day I was at the supermarket getting out of my car, see a young man. I should call him a young man. He's probably in his, mid-20s, but he has this little boy with him, right? And the little boy doesn't shut the door to the car. And he yells at him like a man and calls him the N-word.
Wow.
And didn't I tell you to shut that door? And I wanted to say something so badly, but I don't want to get shot.
And here you are, law enforcement, and you don't want to get shot, right?
Right. But I wanted to say something to, one, the man, and two, the little boy. But, I was in civilian clothes, and I just stayed in my lane. But you see that all the time, okay? You got folks that are living in such dire straits. They're just so frustrated. They have no skills in terms of conflict resolution. Here's an indication to highlight that. This year, last year, and the year before that, we experienced more residential homicides than we ever had. And what I mean by that, folks are in the confines of their homes. There's a disagreement. Disagreements over freaking basketball, and they shoot each other. Now, I say all the time, what am I supposed to do? Put a policeman in the house?
Well, and that's a good question, because we turn to law enforcement all the time to fix everything. Is that does society need a mind shift in terms of how we deal with one another, how we deal with societal issues? Because police, should we expect them to fix everything?
I think because a lot of services had dissipated due to financial constraints over the years, because law enforcement is 24/7, it was just naturally for those that are in policy-making positions to say, well, let the police handle it. Well, our cup runneth over, and now we're not able to do our most primary function, which is answer calls for service with respect to enforcing the law. So, a whole lot has been placed on law enforcement. A whole lot has been placed on chiefs, particularly African-American chiefs in urban settings. I cannot tell you some of the calls I get, some of the requests I got. Insurmountable. The last 2 or 3 weeks, I've been able to sleep at least 6 hours straight without a ring or a ping, I feel good.
That's a good thing. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. 757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. What questions do you have for retired Chief Boone, other than he's not going to tell you any specifics about his retirement, so don't go there, all right? Give us a call, 440-2665, 1-800-940-2240. So, Larry, I know you're involved with NOBLE, which is the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, police chiefs, black police chiefs, and other high-ranking officers. What's the conversation around the country?
Around the country, the last 2 years since George Floyd, a lot of cities since George Floyd, they want progressive chiefs, all right? And most progressive chiefs, okay, they go into these organizations and they start doing things to reshape the organization. And what happens over time, you'll have the rank and file start to leave or retire or go elsewhere, and they push back quietly, right? And then they get into the ears of council, city managers, the mayor, and you start focusing on the chief. Then said city that wanted this police reformist, they say thank you, but no thank you. All right.
So it becomes too sticky for them.
Too much of a mess. And generally, if you look around the country, a lot of African-American chiefs that are police reformists have been told, okay, thank you, but no thank you. The most recent one, Little Rock, Arkansas. You can look over there in Portsmouth. Heck, you can even look
So tell me some of the things that a reformist police chief would do versus a traditional police chief.
Well, you take on the tough stuff that people want you to talk about, i.e., okay, where are guns? How are these kids getting their hands on these guns? Now, I can tell you multiple chiefs across Hampton Roads, they say that's pretty brave because it appears as though, okay, when we started this gun tracking database, some folks will say you're encroaching upon one's Second Amendment right. That's not what I'm doing, okay? What we did was who bought the gun and why 5-6 months down the road the guns is over in certain neighborhoods, some of our poor black and brown neighborhoods, in the hands of our youth and in the hands of felons and at the scene of a crime, right? Mm-hmm. And these guns are not reported stolen. We recovered almost 5,000 guns. Only 200, give or take, were reported stolen. So that tells you there's some shenanigans, to use that word, going on. Okay. So and another thing a reformist police chief would do is make your department look like the community they serve, right? Not just coming in the door. You want folks at the table, right, that have the ability to have input on policy making as well. We are the most diverse police department in Hampton Roads, and we have folks at the table that have been promoted, not because of one thing or another, but because they're capable. We were able to promote Asians, Hispanics, members of the LGBTQ plus community, African Americans, our very first African American female captain, our very first African American female assistant chief. If you want change, you got to do it fairly, right? And you have to promote folks that are capable. Now, did I always get it right? I'm not going to say I did. Nobody ever does. But one thing you cannot say, that I was timid, all right? I made tough decisions for the world to see. I put myself out there during the summer of 2020, during the protests. I had to make disciplined decisions for the whole world to see regarding a certain lieutenant. And I'm going to tell you, Barbara, I caught holy hell for 2 years. Fox News would put me on TV saying, this chief here, I want you to know who he is and where he works.
So you have to be brave.
You got to be brave.
You got to be. You got to be willing to step out there.
Again, if you're going to go to ribbon cuttings, okay, groundbreakings, you need to go to where the trauma is as well when it happens. Mm-hmm. All right. And some folks, I rubbed them wrong by doing those things. But God darn it, what is a police chief supposed to do?
Would you advise a young person today looking for a career to become a police officer?
Absolutely. It's a noble profession. And if you're authentic in your ways about doing the job, you meet some dynamite people. You see opportunities to influence people. I cannot tell you, Barbara, since I retired, the amount of love I've gotten, not just in Norfolk. I'd be in Newport News, Hampton. People just come out of nowhere. I know you, and I don't want to make a scene, but I got much respect for you. I had no idea. I had absolutely no idea.
So when you see things like a George Floyd situation and other opportunities where things don't go so well, particularly with the black community and the police department, what does the community need to know? What do police need to know in terms of how to start to mend that relationship? Well, because there's not a lot of trust there, Chief.
And it's nonstop. You got to address the situation. You got to tell it like it is. When you start to circle the wagon, so to speak, people lose confidence in you. I'll give you an example. When the George Floyd incident was captured for the world to see, mm-hmm. The media asked me my opinion of it. I said, what I saw was a slow and casual murder, okay, of a man at the hands of police. Now, I could have done what a lot of other police chiefs did. I could have said, well, we have to wait for the investigation to unfold. We have to, I saw a 9-minute slow death, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when we see stuff like that, we got to speak truthfully about it, because you cannot convince the community of anything other. So when those things happen, you have to immediately talk about them. All right. Allow people the opportunity to speak their truth without attacking one another. But it's a continuous process. Okay. And there are going to be incidents throughout this summer that we're going to have to talk about.
I was going to say, yeah, because the summertime is coming. Absolutely. If you're just joining us, we're talking with Larry Boone, the former police chief of Norfolk Police Department, in his first long-form radio interview since his retirement. 757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Dan calls us from Chesapeake. Hi, Dan. You're on the air.
Hi, how's everybody doing?
Doing good.
All right, excellent. Here's the question for Mr. Boone. How can we do better with individual accountability? I mean, it does sound like a broken record. An incident happens, an investigation happens, and then we find out there's a history of bad behavior as far as the officer goes. So I'm just wondering, how can departments do better with holding their officers accountable?
Okay.
Thanks, Dan, for the call.
Excellent question, Dan. It starts at the leadership position. Anytime I promote someone, I always tell them, your friends, your colleagues, at some point, you may have to discipline them. And it's not going to be palatable, but you have to do it, because the moment you don't do it, everybody knows that you should have done something and you didn't do it. All right. You have to discipline officers when that moment arrived. I've had many times where I had to discipline folks that I thought a whole lot of. I had many opportunities where I had to terminate folks that I thought a whole lot of. The minute you stop disciplining, when it's warranted, ensuring that they are afforded their due process, that's kind of how you hold people accountable. Now, I will say this, and I'm just going to say it like it is. You have some in leadership positions are deathly afraid to discipline officers because they do not want the rank and file to turn on them. And that's a real reality in this profession, a real reality. And it's not just, that's at any level of leadership, okay? Police officers will circle the wagon if they think or have the belief that someone's not being treated fairly, even when they are. Okay.
How does that manifest? What does that circling of the wagon look like?
The circling of the wagon looks like this. They'll stop talking to you. Social media will come alive, and they will start talking about you in a fashion that isn't very nice, and it's not true, but it grows wheels. And then that supervisor is very concerned about his or her next level of progression in the police department. All right. You have folks, I'm telling you, Bob, you have some folks, not a lot, but you have some that, I'll just say me, that I probably should have never promoted, okay, because they're timid at times. But for the most part, most supervisors will do the hard thing when it's warranted. The difficulties in discipline always come down surrounding politics and race.
So race is an issue still.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Let me say this because I don't want anyone filling in the blanks. The Norfolk Police Department, as I said earlier this week, is one of the most diverse police departments there is in the state. The police department is not, I want to underscore, is not a racist organization. Now, do we have folks within the organization, just like any other organization, that if I could have, I would have got rid of them if I could prove it because of some of their racial perspectives, particularly when it came to promotion, transfers, and discipline. This thing has gotten so crazy Barbara, when I walk into a room, and if the room is with white officers and black officers, immediately in my mind, I'm like, okay, who do I greet first?
Wow.
Because if I greet the wrong person first, I'm going to be labeled X, Y, and Z.
So you have to stand at the door and just say, hey, y'all.
You know, I cannot tell you how many times someone would call, well, Chief, you shook so-and-so in hand and you didn't shake it. That's just not true. But it's just, it wears you out. It does every day.
And that attitude within the department, then does it translate on the street at times? I mean, is that a concern that police chiefs would have? That if you got a racist attitude inside, that it's going to translate to the people that you have to take care of outside?
Let me measure how I answer that, okay? I'm going to say again, easily, well over 90% of the officers do a phenomenal job, regardless of who they are. But I've disciplined and I've terminated folks for racist actions.
Got you. Let's go to Mark in Norfolk. Hi, Mark. You're on the air.
Yeah, good afternoon. How you doing, former Chief Boone?
Hello, Mark.
Hey, good. Look, I just wanted to ask you from an educational standpoint. I've just always been saying, and when Dr. King was the superintendent here in Norfolk, and he actually agreed, we were talking about the concept of boarding schools. And everyone knows that a lot of our children are coming out of very chaotic environments when they leave to go to school. And I was just thinking, there's no way to get back 2 generations lost of sane parenting. And I'm thinking the only way that we're going to gain some ground is for those children who are at risk, that really come from those homes like you mentioned. And I've heard the same thing before, where adults are cursing and calling their children MFs and the whole deal, which is incredible. But for those children, that they could have a safe haven like a boarding school, supported by the Norfolk public school system, it would contain them in an environment to where they wouldn't have to fear about, warming up to go to school, freezing up going back home, but give them a consistent way of just being able to live and to understand what sane life looks like. I think we could kind of circumvent a lot if we did that.
Thanks, Mark, for the call. Let the chief answer.
So Mark, that's a wicked problem, okay? But let me say this. I think there's some utility in that concept, but I also think that the parent and family have to be on board for that. We don't want to arbitrarily just snatch young folks from their homes without the support of their family network. So, yeah, I believe there's some opportunity there. I think, if that was a possibility, you'll see a host of young men and women doing well once they finish the program. So, good question.
Let's talk to Jay in Hampton. Hi, Jay. You're on the air.
How y'all doing? Chief Boone, thank you so much. You are a hero in the community. I just talked about straw purchases before being the biggest problem with gun violence, and what you've done is amazing. So my question is to you, when y'all check the, like you said, you followed up 2,000 guns, I think you said, that were missing but weren't reported stolen. Did y'all have any data to show that the money from the sale of those guns were going to the black and brown communities? Because to me, it seems like if it was, the hammer would come down. Or, and then I'm asking the question because I don't know. Or was the money mainly going to non-minority communities, and that's why the law is so hard to change, because nobody wants that money, that income coming in? And thank you again for your service.
Do you have any follow-up?
So, just for a point of clarification, in 2016 and through current date, we've tracked well over roughly 5,000 guns. Mm-hmm. And out of that 5,000, perhaps maybe 200 plus was reported lost or stolen. So naturally, because of where we are locating these guns at crime scenes, the natural suspicion is these are illegal guns, because they are. Okay, we're taking them from youth, we're taking them from felons, and we're taking them, 9 times out of 10 from a crime scene. When we backtrack the origin of these guns, they were purchased at two locations. One location is Bob's Gun Shop. The other is Superior Pawn in Virginia Beach. Now, I'm not saying that they are doing anything underhanded, but I do know that there's been some investigations with respect to folks doing straw purchasing. Now, with respect to the money, I don't know what happens with that. I know, a person goes into these locations, they're checked, they're legal, they purchased a weapon, and I don't know what happens with the money after that.
Okay, Jay, thanks so much for the call. We appreciate that. Chief, excuse me, when I was talking to a teacher the other day, and she was talking about when she taught fifth grade. She took her class and it was not here in this area, okay? This was up north somewhere. But when she took her students to the park for a nature lesson, and a police officer came over, and one of her students, fifth grader, she said she physically noticed his body language change, his fist balled up. He was visibly shaking as this officer is approaching, and she steps in front of him, to address the officer and find out what's going on and so forth. And she turned to him and asked him, what's the matter? Why did you react that way? And his response was, they're always messing with us. That was his perspective of seeing that officer, because he had never gotten the officer-friendly version. Is that an issue, or is that something that police departments need to really start focusing on for our young people, before they get to the age where they're running around shooting folks? If the only time they see police is when there's a shooting in their neighborhood, how do we change that perspective?
Excellent. I tell you, one of the reasons why when I became chief, I really wanted to focus on community relation, and it's an ongoing struggle. I had some very dynamic people that worked for me that helped put together over 20 plus programs. A lot of the programs are specifically for our youth in terms of trying to build that trust, to alleviate the example that you just shared with us regarding the young man, so that they see us in a different light. We've had multiple programs that were recognized nationally and internationally for that. Now, let me give you an example of what you just described, because growing up where I grew up, there were only African Americans and Puerto Ricans. The only time I saw Caucasians were my teachers and police. Now, with the police, when I saw them, naturally being in uniform and looking a certain way caught my attention, particularly as a young person. But the actions I saw, how they handle grown men, not always in a professional manner. And I saw the reaction, that they were able to elicit from grown men just by walking in their space. So I did the same thing as the little boy you just described. But once I got 13 years of age, I was as tall as I am now. I hadn't grown any more in height. And I remember walking to school one day, and I was accosted by two Caucasian police officers. It was snowing. It was because we walked to school, okay? It was about 6 inches of snow. And they stopped me, and there was a young man in the back seat, young Caucasian, and his face was bloody. And they said, "Is this the guy?" And the young man said, "No." Okay, I'm about 13 years of age, and I left, but I was scared to death. I urinated on myself. I was so scared. Yeah. But they kicked me in the butt, and said, "It wasn't you this time, it will probably be you next time." So that is my reality with police, which is why I pinch myself every time I recognize that I am a law enforcement officer.
Well, that begs the question: why? Why did you? What made you go in that direction?
Well, I was a senior in college. My goal was to be a national football player. That clearly didn't work out. And in one of our games, I saw an African-American sheriff. I'd never seen one before. And he looked so impressive. I mean, he was put together, okay? And I could not get that image out of my head. I watched that man the entire game. And when I graduated from college, I said, perhaps I'll try law enforcement just because of that image. Again, the me I see is the me I'll be. And I said, well, I want to do something that gives back to the community, as corny as it sounds, but that's the truth. But it required you to wear a uniform. And there it is. But more importantly, because of that guy, okay, guy, you know, which is why I will break my neck to go in front of kids, okay, in uniform so they can have an opportunity to see something different.
Did you ever have a conversation with that guy?
No, never
talked
did.
to him.
I saw him that one. Again, it was the first time I had ever seen an African-American law enforcement officer.
Let's talk to Jim in Chesapeake. Hi, Jim. You're on the air.
Yes, good afternoon. Great show again.
Thank you.
I have a question, three questions of three issues.
Okay, very quickly, Jim, because we don't have a lot of time. Go ahead.
What does the chief think of stop and frisk, gun-free zones, and also how these mass murders have slipped through the cracks of, like, mental illness, obvious indicators, like recently occurred, and I'll listen for his answer.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jim, for the call. So he said
stop and frisk.
Stop and frisk, yes. Gun-free zones and mental health being the cover, quote unquote, for the mass shootings.
Okay. Stop and frisk. Stop and frisk actually it is legal if you do it within the confine of the Constitution. For an example, you get a phone call. There's a I'll say white guy for I don't want to offend anyone, but let's say there's a white guy. No, let me just say this. There's a purple guy wearing a white T-shirt and black shorts standing in front of Shop and Go, and he's holding something in his hand that appears to be a gun. All right, you have reasonable suspicion to stop this individual, right? And then once you have this conversation with this individual, his hand remains in his pocket, okay? Terry stop, which is stop and frisk, okay, gives you the right to search that person, to go into his pockets because you have a authentic fear for your life that that's a gun,
okay?
All right? Now, where we went wrong, all right, we started stopping everybody for no reason at all. And I'll be remiss if I because I was just as guilty as that when I was a young officer. We would go into some of these communities, and we're just stopping people. I'm following what I'm seeing, okay? And now I know that's not how you go about doing deterrent policing. Deterrent stop and frisk policing is very surgical. You don't go into a community and stop everybody, okay? You stop that one or two individual that is creating the havoc or that may be breaking the law. We've gotten a lot better at that, and I would say police departments across the nation has gotten a lot better. I probably was too long for that first question, so.
Gun-free zones he wanted to know about.
Gun-free zones, what was the question?
He was just asking about what your opinion was about gun-free zones. Do they work?
No. You know, the mall's a gun-free zone, and that guy had no problem shooting that other individual. Heck, you know, years ago, the same thing happened before. So, yeah, folks aren't going to pay attention to that. You know, if you're criminal-minded, you're criminal-minded. If you're going to carry a gun, you're going to carry a gun. I say it all the time. It is hard to change behavior. It just is. So, no, I don't think they work.
The shooting in Buffalo, when you heard about that, when the massacre, that from a law enforcement perspective, that individual who apparently, allegedly, you know, cased the place, thought about it, wrote the manifesto. I mean, there was a whole string of activity that this individual did before actually going in and shooting. Is there anything from a law enforcement perspective that police could have done prior to his actually carrying out?
Now, I don't want to second guess any organization because
Sure.
I don't know all the moving parts with that.
Okay.
Let me just give you an example here. Okay, here in Norfolk, if we get a report of a student making any threats, okay, it's on. We are going to look under the bed. We are going to press those parents. We are going to press that student until we are satisfied that there's no threat. And it's laborsome because I can tell you across Hampton Roads when folks start making these threats. You have students making threats. I'm gonna come to school and shoot the school up. Police departments, we look into that. We have to.
You have to.
Shame on you if you don't, and they actually come to school and cause some havoc. But yeah, you absolutely have to.
Let's see. Let's talk to Dustin in Norfolk. Hi, Dustin. You're on the air.
Hey, how you guys doing?
All right.
I just wanted to thank the former chief for such a good job, and that I know where I live that it's much safer, and I have no problem letting my kids go to the park, without me being 5 feet away from them. And so I just want to thank you.
Well, thank you, Dustin, and I'll thank the women and men of the Norfolk Police Department on your behalf as well, because it's never the chief. The chief's the only small part of it. It's the rank and file.
Okay. Raphael joins us from Norfolk. Newport News, I'm sorry. Hi, Raphael.
Hi. I also want to echo the thank you, the gratitude. I can understand very much so, being a federal law enforcement officer, that to be the inspiration while being considered the antagonist is a very difficult place to be. So, Chief, you'll always be Chief. Thank you for your service to the community and to people in general, sir.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate you.
See, people showing you that love all the way across Hampton Roads, right?
I appreciate it.
So let me ask you this. When I became, or when I left the newsroom back in the late 90s, and my first month or so, as I'm watching news stories happen and so forth, I would sometimes sit back and go, now, how would I have covered that story? Especially if it was a big news story. What would I have done, so forth. Are you doing any Monday morning quarterbacking in terms of big issues that you see happening from a law enforcement perspective? Or are you saying to yourself, now, if I was still there, I'd do...
Oh, absolutely. Again, I'm an athlete by nature, and I'm competitive by nature. I see things all the time that I would not have said that way or did it that way. You're opening yourself up for X, Y, and Z. I do it all the time. I'm never going to stop that. That's part of who I am.
So what's up for you coming up? Are you gonna stay retired?
I'm gonna fly like an eagle. And when I decide to land, I'll land.
And you'll let us know.
I will.
Oh gosh! So I know that there's about 200. The Norfolk Police Department right now is short about 200 officers, or so. And you're not the only jurisdiction that's short officers. Across the nation, this is a problem. I know when I worked for Prince George's County Police in Maryland, one of the things that seemed to help the relationship between police and the community was that officers were required to have more education. But at one point in time, you could come in with just a high school diploma, for example. While I was there, they raised it to you had to have an associate's degree. Does that help, having more educated officers in terms of how they do their job and the relationships that they are able to create with community?
So when I joined the department, it was very few officers with college degrees. But here recently, almost everybody that joins have some form of college, if not a degree. What it does help, it helps in the arena of use of force. The more educated you are, you're least likely, all right, to use force. You're more likely to talk your way through it. And that's based on data. It's not Chief Boone saying it. It's just based on data. Here's the hiccup. Those folks coming in the door with a college degrees, they want to be compensated appropriately for said degree. And until this nation start looking at this profession as a real profession, right, we're going to continue to get folks that probably shouldn't do this job, okay? You're going to continue to get, to use a term they used to use back in the day, knuckle draggers.
So we got about 2 minutes left. Let me ask you this. If you could talk to the community right now, as you are, what would you say to the community about police and their interaction? And then I'm going to ask it on the other side. What would you say to police about community so that we can come together at some point?
I would say this to the community. You should request to speak to the rank and file of the police department. You should request to speak to the chief. You should hold them accountable, but at the same time, give them the respect they deserve until they show you otherwise. If you are stopped by the police and you feel as though you're not being treated fairly, do not give the officer attitude. That is not the place for it, because I can tell you that officer is just as concerned about their safety as well. So when you elevate, the officer is going to elevate. And I can promise you, okay, that's not the position you want to be in, because the officer most likely is going to win that position. Now, to the officers, to the community, same thing. Okay, so what we're talking about here is mutual respect. Do not approach someone hard and fast by saying, hey, reaching out to them and grabbing them. You know, treat people with dignity and respect. I've seen officers do that. Okay, hey, sir, may I speak to you? And here's why. All right. I've seen officers also say, hey, come here and grab them. You know, you put your hands on a grown man without explaining. All right?
That's not a good thing.
That's not a good thing, okay? Yeah. So at the end of the day, this all comes down to mutual respect for one another, but you don't develop that unless you have conversations, which is why, you know, I went to everything, and I made it mandatory. If you want to be promoted in the organization, you had to go to them too, all right? Yeah. And I hope they continue that process, because you know, when we say the police are the community and the community are the police, that is so true. You know, Sir Edward Peale said that almost 100 plus years ago. It is so true. But at the same time, we have to be authentic in our actions, in our words, and be held accountable. If a police officer or police whomever says they're going to do X, Y, and Z, you better hold them to it.
And make sure it happens. Chief, or retired Chief Boone, so I'm going to declare that you are officially the Another View law enforcement expert, and we will be calling upon you from time to time as things happen and we need to chat with you.
You know I do consulting.
Yeah. You know this is public radio. Thank you so much, Larry. We really appreciate you being here. It's been a great conversation. And thank you, my listening audience, for the privilege of your time over this past hour. Please share this show with a friend. Go to anotherviewradio.org and download the podcast. You can follow us on Facebook or send us an email with your show ideas to contact@anotherviewradio.org. Next week on Another View, Dr. Keith Newby joins us with news about health equity initiatives with Centera and the James E. Newby Foundation. Our theme music is an original composition created especially for Another View by Jay Sennett. We send prayers of healing for our show producer, Lisa Godley. Get better soon, Lisa. Todd Washburn is our audio engineer, and Dr. Barry Graham answered our phones. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Folks, the pandemic is not over. Stay positive and test negative. We'll get together again next Thursday at noon for Another View.
Support comes from Thomas Nelson Community College, now becoming Virginia Peninsula Community College, the first choice, whether starting your bachelor's degree or advancing your career. More at tncc.edu.
Support comes from Hampton Roads Community Foundation, partnering with donors from all walks of life to improve southeastern Virginia through grants, scholarships, and leadership initiatives. Learn more at hamptonroadscf.org.